Hi everyone, my name is Isaac, and I finally got the Xperia XZ2 Premium after many of your viewer requests. Now this phone is actually part of the 4-figure smartphone price club. It starts at $1,000 US, the same price as the iPhone X, the same price as the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. Now, the XZ2 Premium is quite similar in many areas to the Xperia XZ2, the standard version, and the newly released Xperia XZ3. Now the XZ3 kind of has a new design which is still fairly similar to the XZ2, in addition to a new QHD OLED display, the first for a Sony smartphone, as well as the same camera experience and the same specifications as the XZ2 as well. So should you buy the Xperia XZ2 Premium today or wait for the Xperia XZ3 sometime this September? Well, first of all, let's take a closer look at this phone in specific, starting off with the design. Now, the design here is very polarizing for a lot of people. Some people like it, some people hate it, but for me personally, I do kind of like it. It has a very unique overall look. It is a very heavy and thick phone though, and you're definitely going to notice that overall heft and hand feel when you first get this phone. Now that glass in the back, it is very slippery and it will fall out of your hand, it will slide off some surfaces, but thankfully it does have Gorilla Glass 5 on the front and back, and I have actually dropped this phone by accident a few times. It's just slid off tables randomly, but there's been no damage on this phone. It's still basically brand new. The phone is also water resistant, it has an SD card slot, there is no headphone jack sadly, but it does have dual stereo speakers. The sound is loud on these speakers, but it could have a bit more low end in my personal opinion. There's also a fast but horribly misplaced fingerprint scanner on this phone. It's right below the camera module, so you keep pressing the camera by accident. It's just not a very good place for a fingerprint scanner. You're either going to love or hate the design of this phone. Now, for me personally, I like the overall heftiness of it as well as the very unique look, but for many people, it's going to kind of be a pain point. It's a heavy phone, it's a thick phone, and it's also a very slippery phone. Now up front, there's a 5.8-inch 4K LCD display, which is an absolute monster of a display panel, compared to the 1080p panel on the Xperia XZ2 at 5.7 inches. There's thankfully no notch on this display, but the slightly asymmetrical thicker bezels for 2018 kind of hurt a little bit. That crazy sharp 4K resolution is not really noticeable during regular daily usage, but when watching 4K content, it is totally noticeable. Things just look extra crisp and sharp, and I'm actually genuinely surprised how good things actually look on this panel. It has vibrant, beautiful colors, decent brightness, but it could be a bit brighter outdoors. In general though, it is a solid LCD panel. One thing I have noticed though is that some of the app icons on the home screen look a bit blurry, which is definitely kind of weird, but it isn't anything too bothersome at all. Now for me personally, I'd probably trade this 4K LCD panel for a 2K OLED panel any day of the week. I just prefer OLED panels in general, but it is a cool unique feature for this phone, and I can't wait to try out the Xperia XZ3 with its 2K OLED display. Now under the hood, the specifications here are very similar to the Xperia XZ2 and XZ3 with a Snapdragon 845, Adreno 630 GPU, 6GB of RAM, and 64GB of storage. The only difference here is really that extra 2GB of RAM compared to 4GB of RAM on the XZ2 and XZ3. Now this phone does feel very fast. It is a 2018 smartphone, it has super high-end specifications, and you wouldn't expect any less on this device. It has very quick animations, which I really enjoy on Sony phones. It's great for gaming, great for multitasking, and really no complaints here with the general performance. One of the other changes is the battery capacity for this phone. It's 3540 mAh on this device versus 3180 mAh on the Xperia XZ2 and 3300 mAh on the Xperia XZ3. For me personally, I've been able to get a consistent, solid day of usage, but I'm not really at a point where I can say this phone can last a day and a half or 2 days or anything. It's a solid day of usage with this device, and that's basically what I've been able to get. Thankfully, there is Qi wireless charging on this phone, as well as Quick Charge 3 for some quick top-ups, which is great to have on this device. Now, Sony's version of Android is pretty good. It's consistent, it's clean, it has some good design language, and you can actually uninstall or disable most of the stock apps or bloatware apps you don't want, which for me in 2018 feels like a pretty good feature for software on smartphones. There's nothing really wrong or annoying with Sony's software, it just kind of is alright. It's kind of close to stock, kind of not, and it's an okay version of Android, but I wouldn't say it's my personal favorite version of Android. Now moving on to the most hyped part about the phone itself, the camera experience. It was hyped up by Sony themselves with their advertising efforts, as well as just by their fans in general. And it's actually the main reason I wanted to actually get this phone to make this video, to test out that camera setup. First of all though, the selfie camera takes some okay shots, like you get some crispy, sharp details, but colors really aren't perfect and there are some strange artifacting things in some photos, which is really off-putting. But the main camera setup, that's where all the action is. You're getting a 19 megapixel f1.8 camera plus a 12 megapixel black and white f1.6 camera versus a 19 megapixel camera with f2.0 aperture on the Xperia XZ2 and Xperia XZ3. And photos are pretty solid in general. They're crisp, there's highly accurate colors in favor of highly saturated colors, which is good, but some photos do turn out a bit dull at times, but of course you can also edit these shots out of the camera. There's also mostly quite solid dynamic range on this phone. Portrait mode is kind of a hit or miss at times though, like sometimes it does a pretty decent job and other times it just didn't at all. But when actually shooting some close-ups of like flowers or other objects, you can actually produce better blurred background results taking pictures with the regular camera than you can actually taking pictures with the portrait mode on. So don't really use portrait mode, it's not that great, but sometimes you may get some occasional good results. You can also shoot monochrome pictures with the second camera, but it's not really something I've ever wanted to use on this phone or even tested on this device, especially with that very limited resolution set of options. In low light though, that's where the phone really shines, with up to ISO 51200. For 4K video, the phone delivers some great looking results, and with a quick switch to HDR mode, you can get better dynamic range and room to edit the videos even more. As you can see, shadows aren't as deep, with highlights like the sky providing more available detail for you to see and to work with. Colors are more dull for sure, but this mode is definitely for those who plan to edit the videos after the fact. Electronic image stabilization is definitely a weakness of this phone in video mode, as the phone has no optical image stabilization. It isn't super smooth, and 4K video lacks any enhanced stabilization that the 1080p mode does have. There's still no tap to focus in 4K mode, which totally sucks, and 1080p mode is probably your best bet overall for video shooting from my testing. Low light video is also pretty sweet looking too. Just like photos, it has a great ISO range up to 12,800 ISO. Now this being all said, the camera experience on this phone is great, but it's not like incredibly amazing, the best overall camera experience ever on a smartphone. There are some shortcomings, there are some faults, but it is Sony's best work yet for a smartphone camera so far. Good job, Sony. So to summarize, the Xperia XZ2 Premium does have some good features and upgrades compared to the Xperia XZ2 and even the upcoming Xperia XZ3. The only major changes there are the new design, the OLED display, and that's really kind of it compared to this phone. This phone still has the most RAM for a Sony phone, it still has dual cameras, and it has the highest resolution display on really any smartphone today. And back to that price point once again, this phone starts at $1,000 US currently. It may be cheaper elsewhere, maybe more expensive elsewhere, but it's kind of more expensive than many other great flagship phones on the market currently, and the same price as the iPhone X and Samsung Galaxy Note 9. So you have to decide if what Sony offers you here is really worth that price point compared to the less expensive competition. Now, for me personally, I do like this phone quite a bit. It has some cool features, nice, different design, but at the price point of $1,000 US, it is a bit hard to digest, especially with like 6 months from now, the XZ3 Premium is probably going to be out replacing this phone, and you're probably going to feel bad about it as well. But I do want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below about this device. Did you buy it? Would you consider buying it? What do you think of the price and feature combination? Let me know down below, and thank you for watching.